I never thought a piece of cake could change my life forever. Not just change it, but shatter it, and then rebuild it into something unrecognizable, something stronger than I could have ever imagined. There I was, Helen, 67 years old, standing in a kitchen that was once mine, a ghost in my own home. My hands, gnarled with the first whispers of arthritis, were dusted with a fine white layer of flour. I was in the middle of preparing dinner, the same shepherd's pie I had made every Tuesday for the last 5 years. 5 years since my husband George had passed, and my world had shrunk to the size of this house, this kitchen, this thankless routine. That's when it happened. My daughter-in-law, Linda, picked up the porcelain plate from the counter. It wasn't just any plate. It was the last of a set my late mother had given me, hand-painted with delicate blue forget-me-nots. I could still remember my mother's hands, warm and gentle, as she wrapped it in tissue paper for my wedding day. "So you never forget where you came from, Helen," she had whispered. Linda's face was a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. Her manicured fingers, always painted a garish shade of red, gripped the plate like a weapon. And then, with a guttural scream that seemed to rip from the very depths of her soul, she smashed it against the kitchen floor. The sound was a gunshot in the quiet afternoon, a sharp, crystalline explosion that echoed the sound of my own heart breaking. The porcelain fragments scattered across the linoleum, glittering like cruel, sharp-edged stars. Each piece a tiny testament to the destruction of my life. "I can't stand your stupidity anymore, old woman," she screamed. Her voice, a shrill instrument I had learned to fear, scraped against my nerves. "How dare you? How dare you eat the last piece of cake I bought for Michael? You are shameless." I just stood there, frozen. My body trembled, a fine, uncontrollable tremor that started in my flour-dusted hands and spread through my entire being. The cake. It had been a single, lonely slice of chocolate fudge cake sitting in the back of the refrigerator. I'd seen it when I was getting the milk out. It had looked abandoned, a small, simple pleasure in a life that had become devoid of them. I hadn't known. I truly hadn't. "Linda, please," I whispered, my voice barely a thread of sound. "I didn't know it was for Michael. I thought—" Her face was suddenly inches from mine. She was a whirlwind of cheap perfume and fury. I could smell the sourness on her breath, a mix of coffee and contempt. "Don't give me excuses," she interrupted, her spittle hitting my cheek. "Ever since you came to this house, you've done nothing but cause problems. You are a leech. You eat our food, you use our electricity, our water, and on top of that, you have the nerve to steal my husband's cake." Steal. That word, it wasn't just an accusation. It was a dagger, sharp and cold, and she plunged it directly into my chest, twisting it with a vicious satisfaction. Me, a thief. I, who had raised Michael from the moment he was a screaming, red-faced infant. I, who had sold my wedding jewelry, the last tangible pieces I had of my own mother, to pay for his college tuition when times were tough. I, who had worked double shifts at the textile factory until my fingers bled and my back was a constant screaming knot of pain, just so he would never want for anything. And now, in the home my husband and I had built, in the family I had dedicated my life to, I was a thief. A shameless old woman who stole cake. Just then, Michael appeared at the kitchen door, drawn by the shouting. My son, my only son. A wave of desperate hope washed over me. He would see this. He would see his wife, contorted with rage, screaming at his elderly mother over a piece of cake. He would defend me. He would tell her to stop this madness. He had to, but then our eyes met. And in that moment, across the wreckage of the shattered plate, I saw something that broke my soul in a way Linda's rage never could. Shame. He was ashamed. Not of his wife's monstrous behavior, but of me, of his own mother. "What happened in here?" he asked, his voice heavy with a profound weariness, as if my very existence was a burden he was forced to bear each and every day. "Your mother," Linda said, her voice instantly transforming, dripping with a syrupy, manipulative sweetness. She turned to him, her face a mask of wounded innocence, a performance she had perfected over the years. "She ate your birthday cake, the piece I saved especially for you after your long, hard day at work." Michael's shoulders slumped. He let out a long, slow sigh and rubbed his face, a gesture of deep exasperation that I knew was directed entirely at me. "Mom," he said, his voice laced with disappointment. We've told you 1,000 times. You have to ask before you take something from the refrigerator. The world tilted on its axis. The floor felt like it was crumbling beneath my feet. My own son, my Michael, was defending her. This woman who treated me with less respect than a hired maid. My mind reeled, a chaotic slideshow of 1,000 other humiliations. The times Linda had screamed at me for using the upstairs bathroom. That's for us, Helen, not for you. The times she'd snapped at me for sitting on the new living room sofa. You'll wear it out. The times she'd turned off the television while I was watching my evening program, declaring it was her time to watch her shows. And through it all, Michael was always silent, always avoiding conflict, always choosing her peace over my dignity. You know what? Linda said, turning her malicious smile on Michael, her eyes glittering with triumph. I think it's time. It's time for your mother to find somewhere else to live. This house, it's just gotten too small for all of us. The words fell like bombs into the suffocating silence of the kitchen. They hung in the air, thick and poisonous. I looked at Michael, begging him with my eyes to say something, anything, to deny it, to fight for me. But he said nothing. He just stared at the broken pieces of porcelain on the floor, as if they held the answers to the universe. And in his silence, I understood everything. I understood that for 5 long years, I hadn't been living with family. I had been a tenant in a prison of their tolerance. I had been tolerated out of a grudging sense of duty, enduring daily humiliation because I had nowhere else to go and no one else to turn to. But Linda, I whispered, my voice cracking, a pathetic, weak sound. This house, it belonged to my husband, to George. We bought it together 30 years ago. It was, her laugh was a short, cruel bark. Was, she emphasized, savoring the word. It was in his name, but now it's in Michael's name. And Michael is married to me. So this is my house, and if you don't like how we run our home, Helen, there's the door. My mind flashed back with painful clarity. I remembered the day Michael and Linda announced they were getting married. They were young, in love, and had no money for the down payment on a house. I remembered sitting at a lawyer's office, the air thick with the smell of old paper and furniture polish, signing the papers to transfer the property deed to him. I did it without a second thought, trusting that my son would always provide a place for me, his mother, in his home. My home. I remembered the $15,000 I took from my life savings, the money George and I had so carefully put away for our old age, to pay for their extravagant honeymoon to Hawaii. I remembered the $10,000 I lent them, money they never paid back, when Linda had a whim to open her own beauty salon. Every sacrifice, every penny, every piece of my heart I had given them was now being thrown back in my face. Sure, Mom. Michael's voice, devoid of all emotion, pulled me from my thoughts. Maybe Linda is right. You could look for a small apartment, something more comfortable for you, comfortable for me, as if the problem was my comfort and not the fact that his wife was a tyrant and he was too much of a coward to stand up to her. I don't have money for an apartment, son, I told him, clinging to the last shred of my dignity. My pension is barely enough for groceries. Well, Linda shrugged, examining her perfectly painted nails with an air of complete indifference. Then you'll have to get a job. People can perfectly well work at 67. A job, at my age, with my arthritic hands that ached with every movement, with my back that screamed in protest every morning, after I had already worked for 40 years in that same factory, breathing in cotton dust until my lungs burned, after I had raised Michael virtually alone because his father worked day and night to put food on our table. In that moment, something inside me didn't just break, it shattered. It wasn't just my mother's porcelain plate. It was something much deeper, something irreplaceable. The image I had of my family, the desperate hope that things would someday get better, the beautiful tragic illusion that my son loved me enough to protect me. I couldn't sleep that night. Sleep was a luxury for those with peace of mind, and my mind was a raging battlefield. I lay awake in my small, cramped room, the one that used to be Michael's study, staring into the darkness. The shadows on the walls danced and swirled, morphing into the faces of my past, mocking me. I remembered every misstep, every sacrifice, every decision that had led me to this private hell. I looked around at the 4 walls that had become my prison, decorated with a few artifacts I had managed to salvage from my old life. There on the nightstand was my wedding photo, George and I, so young, so full of hope, his arm wrapped tightly around my waist. On the wall hung my grandmother's rosary, its wooden beads worn smooth from a lifetime of prayer, and propped on the dresser was the antique silver-backed mirror George had given me on our 10th anniversary. "So you can always see how beautiful you are to me," he'd said. How had I ended up here? How had I gone from being the cherished wife and proud matriarch of my own home to this frightened, trembling woman who had to ask permission to eat a piece of cake? My mind drifted back, unbidden, to the day Michael was born. I was in labor for 18 excruciating hours, alone. George had to work an extra shift at the plant. He couldn't afford to miss it, but when I finally held that tiny 7-pound baby in my arms, when I looked into his scrunched-up, perfect little face, I made a vow. I swore to God that this child would never know the poverty and hardship I had lived through. That was the promise that defined the rest of my life. I went back to work at the textile factory when he was just 6 months old, leaving him with my dear neighbor, Abigail, a woman with a heart as big as her house. My wages went to diapers, to milk, to medicine for his ear infections. When Michael was 8, all he wanted for Christmas was a shiny red bicycle he'd seen in the department store window. I worked double shifts for 3 solid months to afford it. I remember my hands, raw and bleeding from the relentless friction of the machines, my feet so swollen I could barely squeeze them into my shoes after standing for 14 hours straight. But it was all worth it. The look on his face that December morning, the pure, unadulterated joy. That was my payment. When he turned 15, he was desperate for a pair of brand-name basketball shoes, the ones all his friends had. I didn't have the money, so I sold my gold earrings, the only ones my mother had left me before she died. Michael never knew where the money came from. He just knew he got the shoes he wanted so badly. And when he graduated from high school, top of his class, with dreams of studying engineering, the tuition was a mountain we couldn't climb. So I mortgaged the house, the little house my own parents had left me, $20,000. It had taken my family 2 generations to own that home free and clear, and I bet it all on my son's future. He made it. He graduated with honors, landed a good job at a prestigious firm. I was so proud my heart felt like it would burst. But then, Linda arrived. He met her at a company party. She was the manager's secretary, 10 years younger than Michael, with impossibly long nails and a laugh that grated on the nerves. From the very first day he brought her home for dinner, I knew. I felt a cold knot of dread in my stomach, the way she looked at me, her eyes scanning my simple clothes, my modest home, as if I were something unpleasant to be tolerated for Michael's sake. At first, it was subtle, little things, little cuts that bled slowly, comments about my clothes. "Oh, Helen, are you still wearing that green dress? It's so old-fashioned." Criticisms about my cooking. "The soup is a bit too salty, don't you think?" Suggestions about my appearance. "You should cut your hair shorter. Long gray hair is so aging." Michael would just laugh nervously and tell me to ignore her. "That's just Linda," he'd say. "She's just very direct, but she has a good heart." A good heart. How naive my son was. Or perhaps how willfully blind he had become. The wedding was the first major blow. Linda wanted a fairy tale, a ceremony at the most expensive hotel in the city, with 300 guests, a 10-piece band, and a wedding dress imported from Italy. The total cost was a staggering $45,000. Michael earned good money, but not that much. So once again, it was Mom to the rescue. "It's just a loan, Mom," he'd told me, his eyes pleading, the same look he'd used to get an extra cookie when he was 5. "I'll pay you back within a year." I promise. A promise he never kept. I cashed out my retirement plan. Every single dollar I had painstakingly saved for 20 years. Gone. Gone on flowers, musicians, and lobster for a wedding that lasted 6 hours. They never paid me back a single cent. Then came the house. Their apartment was too small, according to Linda. They needed something bigger, more elegant, in a better neighborhood. They found the perfect house, $120,000. Michael had $30,000 saved, but they needed another $30,000 for the down payment. "Mom," he'd said to me one afternoon, while Linda pretended to be busy in the kitchen, listening to every word. "Remember the house where you lived with Dad? It's in an area that's really appreciating in value. You could sell it and come live with us. That way, you'd be close to family, and you could help us with the down payment." The house where I had lived for 30 years. The house where I had raised Michael. The house where I had held George's hand as he took his last breath. The house where every wall, every floorboard, held a memory. I sold it for $50,000 and gave them $30,000. I kept the other $20,000 for my future, not knowing it would become my only financial lifeline. At first, living with them wasn't so terrible. Michael worked all day and Linda was often out with her friends, so I had the house mostly to myself. I cooked, I cleaned, I tended the garden. I felt useful. But then Linda quit her job. She decided she wanted to be an entrepreneur. She wanted to open a high-end beauty salon. The cost for the equipment, the rent, the decorations, another $15,000. Mom, it's a safe investment, Michael had explained, while Linda beamed beside him. In 2 years, we'll pay you back everything with interest. Another $15,000 from my dwindling savings. I was left with only $5,000 from a lifetime of work and sacrifice. The beauty salon went bankrupt in 6 months. Linda blamed the location, the clients, the economy, everyone but herself. The money never came back, and that's when my life became a living hell. I was no longer a mother-in-law. I was the unpaid help. Linda started treating me like a maid. I had to be up at 5 in the morning to make their breakfast. I washed the dishes, did the laundry, cleaned the house from top to bottom. If I dared to protest, she would remind me with a sickly sweet smile that I was living in her house for free. It's not that we don't love you, Helen, she would say. But you have to understand that this is a family, and in a family, everyone helps each other. Help each other. While I did all the work without so much as a thank you, the humiliations escalated. I was forbidden from using the main bathroom. My shower time was restricted to 5 a.m. before they woke up. I couldn't watch television after 8 p.m. because it disturbed their peace. I couldn't have visitors because the house isn't a hotel. When my old neighbor Abigail came to see me once, Linda treated her so coldly that the poor woman never came back. I was completely isolated, utterly dependent on the goodwill of 2 people who clearly wished I would just disappear. Michael saw it all. He saw the coldness, the cruelty, but he always had an excuse. Linda was stressed. It was difficult for 3 adults to live in the same house. I should be more understanding. Me, the woman who had sacrificed everything for him. And now, after 5 years of this relentless torment, after giving them every last cent of my savings, they were kicking me out. All over a single piece of cake. The next morning, the sun streamed into my room, but it brought no warmth. Linda appeared at my door with a smile that didn't reach her cold, calculating eyes. In her hands, she held a folder full of papers. It was barely 7 in the morning, but she was already perfectly dressed and made up, as if she had been planning this moment, this final execution, for hours. "Good morning, mother-in-law," she said, her voice cloyingly sweet. "I hope you slept well. We have some important things to discuss." I sat up in my narrow bed, clutching my thin nightgown, feeling vulnerable and small under her triumphant gaze. Michael stood in the doorway behind her, a ghost in his own home, avoiding my eyes. He held a coffee cup with both hands, staring into it as if it held the secrets to the universe, anything to avoid looking at me. "Look, Helen," Linda continued, pulling the only chair in my room closer to the bed and sitting down, crossing her legs like a queen holding court. "Michael and I talked all night, and we've come to a decision that we think will be for the best. For everyone. Such a neat, tidy way of saying they were throwing me out on the street. We've decided to give you 1 month," she announced, as if she were bestowing upon me a great and generous gift. 1 full month to find another place to live. That's more than enough time to find a small, comfortable apartment. An apartment. With what money? With what hope? I wanted to scream the words at her, but my throat was tight with unshed tears. I stayed silent, knowing my financial problems were of no concern to her. "And," she went on, opening the folder with a flourish, "to make things easier for you, we've prepared these documents. They're just legal formalities. To protect the family." She held the papers out to me. There were several pages, dense with fine print, covered in official-looking stamps, with little yellow tabs marking the places where I was supposed to sign my life away. I tried to read them, but without my reading glasses, the words were just a blurry, incomprehensible mess. What do they say?" I asked, hating the helpless, feeble sound of my own voice. "They're release forms," Michael finally spoke, his voice flat and detached as he approached the bed. Basically, you waive any future claim on this property, and you acknowledge that you are leaving of your own free will. Waive. Free will. As if I had any choice in this humiliation. But Michael, my voice trembled, your father and I bought this house. I gave you the down payment. I have a right. Mom, he interrupted, a sharp edge of impatience in his tone. That was 30 years ago. Things have changed. You transferred the property deed to my name when we got married. Legally, you no longer have any rights to this house. Legal rights. My own son was speaking to me like I was a stranger, a squatter trying to scam him out of his property. Besides, Linda interjected, her voice dripping with cruelty, you've lived here for 5 years without paying a cent of rent, without paying for utilities, eating our food. If we were to add it all up, you probably owe us about $20,000 in expenses. $20,000. The exact amount I had left in my savings after giving them everything. The same amount I had held on to from the sale of my own home, a home I sold for them. But of course they wouldn't remember that convenient detail. Also, she continued, relentless, there's the matter of all the damage you've caused. That plate you broke yesterday? That was an antique. It cost $500. The stains on the carpet in your room. The general wear and tear from your presence here. Every word was another slap in the face. They were billing me for the privilege of being mistreated in what used to be my home. If you sign these papers, Michael said, still avoiding my eyes, we will forgive those debts, and we'll let you leave in peace. In peace. As if I had the option of declaring war, I took the papers. My hands trembled so violently I could barely hold them. Even without my glasses, I could make out a few of the bolded phrases. Total waiver of rights, voluntary departure, no future claim. It was like signing my own civil death sentence. My formal abdication from the family I had built. And if I don't sign? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Linda and Michael exchanged a look, a silent, chilling communication. It was Michael who answered. Then we'd have to do this the legal way. An eviction lawsuit, seizing your belongings to cover the debts. It's a long, expensive, and ugly process. And in the end, you'd still end up on the street. But you'd have a legal record that would make it almost impossible for you to rent any other place to live. A legal record. My own son was threatening to ruin my name, to brand me a delinquent if I didn't submit to his and his wife's terms. I looked at Michael, desperately searching for any trace of the boy I had raised. The little boy who used to cry in my arms when he had nightmares. The young man who had hugged me on his graduation day and whispered, "Thank you for everything, Mom." But there was nothing. I saw only a stranger wearing my son's face. A stranger who had chosen a manipulative, cruel woman over the mother who had given him everything she had. Are you really going to do this to me, Michael? I asked him directly, ignoring Linda's smug presence. Are you really going to throw your own mother out onto the street after everything I've done for you? For a fleeting second, I saw a flicker of doubt in his eyes. His hands trembled slightly around his coffee cup. I thought that maybe, just maybe, he would remember. He would remember who I was. But then Linda, sensing his weakness, placed a proprietary hand on his shoulder, and the moment was gone. The hesitation vanished, replaced by a cold resolve. "Mom, don't be so dramatic," he said, his voice now firm and cold. "We're not throwing you on the street. We're giving you a month to get organized. That's more than most families would do. Most families, as if we were a statistic in a newspaper article, not his own flesh and blood. Besides," Linda added maliciously, "at your age, you should be grateful we put up with you for this long. Plenty of 67-year-old women live alone. They work, they support themselves. They don't depend on their children like little girls." Little girls. This woman who had never worked an honest day in her life, who had bankrupted her own business in 6 months, who lived entirely off the money her husband earned from the education I had paid for, was calling me dependent. Something inside me didn't just shatter, it turned to ice. It wasn't anger. It wasn't sadness. It was something much deeper, and strangely, it was liberating. It was the final, definitive death of my illusions. The final acceptance that the son I loved no longer existed. He had been replaced by this selfish, weak man who wore his face. "All right," I said, with a calm that surprised even me. "I'll sign the papers." Michael looked visibly relieved. Linda smiled in open triumph. Neither of them realized that in that moment, something fundamental had changed within me. The victim was gone. I took the pen Linda offered me, and signed every page without reading a single word more. Helen J. Miller. My full name, scrawled on the documents that sealed my exile from the very family I had created. Very good, Linda said, collecting the papers as if they were a winning lottery ticket. We'll give you a copy for your records. And remember, 1 month, until the 15th of next month. They left my room then, as if they'd just concluded a simple business transaction, leaving me alone with the echo of my own signature. But for the first time in 5 long, suffocating years, I didn't feel defeated. I felt free. Free from the obligation to love people who didn't love me. Free from the need to justify my own existence in my own home. Free from the hope that had been my prison. I got out of bed. I got dressed in my prettiest dress, the green one Linda hated so much. And I walked out of the house. I had a very important phone call to make. I walked through the streets of my old neighborhood, feeling like a tourist in my own life. I hadn't left the house alone in months, maybe years. I always had to ask for permission, to give explanations, to justify my every move as if I were a child. But now, with the signed papers in my purse, I felt strangely liberated from those invisible chains. My destination was a small, unassuming brick building downtown, the office of Mr. David Evans, the lawyer who had handled my family's legal affairs for over 20 years. He had drafted my husband's will. He had handled the sale of my parents' house. He knew every detail of my financial history. If anyone could help me understand what few options I had left, it was him. His secretary, Karen, a kind woman my age, recognized me immediately. Her face broke into a warm smile. Mrs. Miller, what a pleasure to see you. How is the family? The family. The words were a painful irony. Fine, Karen, thank you, I lied. Is Mr. Evans available? I need to consult with him about something urgent. Of course, please, go right in. He always has time for you. Mr. Evans was a man in his late 50s with kind eyes and hair that was more salt than pepper. He had been one of George's closest friends, and he had always treated me with the warmth and respect of family. When I entered his office, his welcoming smile faded as soon as he saw the look on my face. Helen, what's happened? You look different. I sank into the plush leather chair across from his large mahogany desk, and without a word, took out the papers I had signed that morning. I handed them to him. David put on his reading glasses and reviewed them with the quiet focus of a true professional, his frown deepening with every page he turned. When he finished, he looked up at me, his expression a mixture of disbelief and grave concern. Helen, you signed this morning. Michael and Linda said it was necessary, to make things easier. Make what easier, Helen? His voice had an edge of alarm that I had never heard from him before. And then the dam broke. I told him everything. The humiliation over the cake, the 5 years of escalating mistreatment, the eviction from the house, the legal threats. The words poured out of me in a torrent, a confession I had been holding in for half a decade. When I finally finished, breathless and emotionally drained, David was silent for a long time, drumming his fingers on his desk. Helen, he finally said, his voice grave. These documents, they are a legal travesty. Michael is having you waive rights you probably didn't even know you had. What do you mean? First, the house. It's true you transferred the deed to Michael's name, but under our state's family property laws, you likely retained what's called lifetime residency rights. That means you had the legal right to live in that house until the day you died, regardless of whose name was on the deed. Lifetime residency rights. The words hung in the air, a ghost of a life I could have had, a protection I never knew existed. Second, he continued, the expenses they're claiming you owe them. Living with family doesn't automatically create a debt, especially when you substantially contributed to the acquisition of the property in the first place. Their claim is legally baseless. But I already signed it, David, I whispered, feeling more foolish and naive than ever. Documents signed under extreme emotional duress can sometimes be annulled, he explained. But it's a complicated, lengthy, and very expensive legal battle. Expensive. The word that always spelled the end of my hopes. David, I don't have money for lawyers. I only have $5,000 left. That's all that remains from all my savings. I know, Helen. I know your financial situation better than anyone, he said softly. He fell silent again, looking out the window as if weighing a heavy decision. Then, he turned back to his desk, opened a bottom drawer, and pulled out a thick manila folder with my name on it. Helen, there's something I need to tell you. Something that arrived 3 days ago. I was going to call you, but with all this... He opened the folder and took out several official-looking documents covered in stamps and seals. Your brother Daniel has passed away. The words hit me like a bucket of ice water. Daniel, my older brother. 5 years my senior. We had lost touch over a decade ago after a stupid, prideful family argument. He had moved to Texas, made a new life for himself. I knew he had done well in business, but we hadn't spoken since our father's funeral. When? I asked, my voice breaking. A month ago. He died of a massive heart attack at his home in Dallas. He had no children. His wife passed away 2 years ago from cancer. A month. My brother had been dead for a month, and I hadn't known. While I was enduring daily humiliations, my brother had left this world without us ever reconciling. His lawyer in Dallas contacted me, David continued gently. Daniel named you as the sole executor and beneficiary of his will. Will? David's face broke into the first genuine smile I had seen since I arrived. Helen, your brother left you everything, absolutely everything. I stared at him, uncomprehending. What do you mean everything? His construction company, his commercial properties, his stock portfolio, his bank accounts. After all taxes and fees, the total estate is valued at approximately $8 million. $8 million. The figure was so absurd, so astronomical, that I thought I must have misheard him. Did you say 8 million? $8 million, Helen. Your brother was a very, very successful man. He built shopping centers all over Texas. His businesses were worth a fortune. I was paralyzed, struck dumb by the sheer scale of it. $8 million. I, Helen Miller, who had been worrying about how I was going to pay $500 a month for a tiny apartment, had just become a millionaire. There's also a personal letter for you, David said, pulling a sealed envelope from the folder. Daniel wrote it 6 months ago, after he was diagnosed with his heart condition. I took the letter with trembling hands. My brother's familiar, strong handwriting, a sight I hadn't seen in so many years. Dear Helen, if you're reading this, it means I'm no longer in this world, and you're finally going to know the truth about my life. I always admired you, little sister, for your strength, your loyalty. When Dad got sick and I left like a coward to chase a fortune, you were the one who stayed behind to take care of him. When Mom needed that surgery, I sent money, but you were the one who gave your time, your love, your life. I built an empire here, but I never built a family. And I never had the courage to pick up the phone and call you after our stupid fight. My pride was stronger than my love. Now that I know my time is short, I want to try and fix that one great mistake. Everything I have is now yours, not because you need my charity, but because it belongs to you by right. You're the one who always gave everything for our family without ever asking for anything in return. Use this money to be free, Helen. Use it to live the life you truly deserve. With all my love and all my regret, your brother, Daniel. Tears streamed down my face as I read my dead brother's words. Words of love and validation that had arrived at the exact moment I needed them most. A lifeline from beyond the grave. The legal paperwork will take about 6 weeks to finalize, David explained gently. I have to coordinate with the lawyers in Dallas, transfer the property titles, open new bank accounts here for you. But everything is in order. Your brother made sure it would be a clean and simple process. David, I said, wiping my tears with the back of my hand. Do Michael and Linda? Do they know anything about this? No, and they don't have to know. Not until you decide what you want to do with this information. A smile slowly formed on my face. For the first time in years, a real smile, one that came from deep within my soul. You know what, David? I said, a new strength hardening my voice. I think I'm going to keep this a little secret for a while longer. I have a few things I need to take care of first. What kind of things? He asked, a curious look in his eyes. Family business, I replied, my mind already racing, thinking of the papers I had signed that morning. There are some outstanding debts that I need to settle. I left the lawyer's office feeling like I was floating on air. $8 million, absolute freedom, the power to choose my own path for the first time since my husband had died. But more than the money, what filled me with an electric energy was the profound sense of poetic justice. After 5 years of being treated like a worthless burden, like a beggar in my own family, I now held the power to change all the rules of the game. I walked back to the house that was no longer mine with a smile on my face that I couldn't erase. Michael and Linda had no idea what was coming for them. The real war was just beginning. The next few days were the strangest of my life. On the outside, I was still the same submissive, quiet Helen who washed the dishes without complaint and swept the floors without being asked. But on the inside, a revolution was taking place. It was as if I had woken up from a 5-year-long nightmare and could finally see reality with a chilling, absolute clarity. Michael and Linda noticed the change in my demeanor, but they misinterpreted it as resignation. They thought I had finally accepted my fate, that I was behaving like the good, defeated little old woman they expected me to be. "It's good that you've finally seen reason, mother-in-law," Linda told me on the second day after I'd signed the papers, her voice dripping with condescension. "You seem much more relaxed. You're probably relieved to not have the pressure of maintaining such a big house anymore." Maintaining a house. As if I hadn't been the one single-handedly keeping it from falling into disrepair for 5 years, while she spent her days painting her nails and watching daytime television. "Yes," I replied, offering a placid smile that she took for submission. "I feel very liberated." Michael, too, seemed more at ease around me. Now that my eviction was a certainty, he even dared to feign kindness, as if signing away my right to a home had magically restored his filial affection. "Mom, I've been thinking," he said to me one night at dinner. "Maybe I can help you look online for a nice little apartment. Something close by so we can visit you often." Visit me often. The absurdity of it was almost comical. This from the man who hadn't willingly spent more than 5 minutes alone with me in 5 years, despite living under the same roof. "That would be very nice, son," I replied, my mysterious smile firmly in place. Meanwhile, I used every spare moment to orchestrate my new life. I was on the phone with David several times a day, urging him to expedite the inheritance paperwork. I instructed him to be discreet, to handle everything from his office without my name being visibly attached to any transactions yet. "Are you sure you want to keep this a secret, Helen?" he asked during one of our calls. $8 million isn't exactly something you can hide forever. "I just need a few more weeks, David," I explained. "I have a plan." The plan began to crystallize when I remembered a hushed conversation I had overheard between Michael and Linda the week before. They were in the living room, arguing about their finances, thinking I was out of earshot in the kitchen. "The balloon payment on the car loan is due next month," Michael had told his wife, his voice strained. "It's $8,000 we just don't have. And the Visa card is completely maxed out." "What about the MasterCard?" Linda had replied, her voice sharp with anxiety. "That's at $12,000. We can barely make the minimum interest payments. And don't forget the mortgage on the house. We still have 15 years left on it. We still owe $90,000. $90,000 on the mortgage. The mortgage on the house that my husband and I had originally paid for. The house I had given them the down payment for. The house that was built on the foundation of my life's savings. That night, long after they had gone to sleep, I tiptoed downstairs to the living room. I carefully sifted through the stack of papers they always left on the dining room table. Bills, bank statements, letters from creditors. The situation was far worse than I had overheard. Michael earned a decent salary, $4,000 a month, but their expenses were nearly $5,000. They were living far beyond their means, covering the shortfall with credit cards and personal loans that were spiraling into an unpayable vortex of debt. In 6 months, a year at most, they would be facing bankruptcy. And that's when I had the most brilliant, most devious idea of my life. The next day, while Linda was out at the salon getting her nails done, a weekly ritual they couldn't afford but refused to give up, I sat down with Michael in the kitchen. "Son," I began, my voice filled with carefully rehearsed worry. "I've been thinking about my financial situation." "What's wrong, Mom?" he asked, looking uncomfortable, as he always did when the topic of money came up. "Well, you know I only have my $5,000 in savings. It's not enough to rent a place and support myself until I can find a job." Michael fidgeted. "Mom, I already told you. We'll help you find something affordable." No, I interrupted him gently. "I don't want to be any more of a burden to you. You've already done so much, putting up with me for so long." I saw him visibly relax, relieved that I wasn't about to ask for a handout. "But I had an idea," I continued, "and I want to know what you think." "What idea?" "Do you remember my old friend Abigail, the one who lived next door to our old house?" "Yeah, sure." "Well, it turns out her brother passed away last month and left her a small house downtown. Abigail already has her own place, and she wants to sell this new property quickly." Michael listened attentively, still not seeing where this was going. "The house is worth about $30,000, but Abigail told me she would sell it to me for $20,000, just because we're lifelong friends." "Mom, that's great, but you don't have $20,000. "I know," I said, pausing for dramatic effect. "But I had an idea. What if you were to lend me the $15,000 I'm missing? I'll put in my $5,000. You lend me $15,000, and I'll buy the little house. Then I'll pay you back little by little with my pension." Michael grew thoughtful. I could practically see the gears turning in his head. "And where am I supposed to get $15,000, Mom?" "Well," I said, as if the idea had just occurred to me, "you could get a home equity loan. With this house as collateral, it would be a safe investment for you because the property I'm going to buy is worth more than what I'll be paying for it." A home equity loan, the most delicious part of my plan. "I don't know, Mom. I'd have to talk to Linda about it." "Of course. Think it over. I'm just saying, it would be the perfect solution for everyone. I would have my own house, and you two would finally have your complete privacy." That night, I pressed my ear to my bedroom door and listened to them discussing it in their room. The walls in that house were thinner than they thought. "It's a brilliant idea," Linda was saying, her voice excited. "We get rid of her for good, and we even make some money in the process." "What do you mean, make money?" Michael asked. "Think about it, Michael. We lend her $15,000. She'll pay us back with her $300 a month pension. In 5 years, she'll have paid us $18,000. We make $3,000 in interest. But what if she can't pay? Then we get to take the house she bought, which is worth $30,000. It's a guaranteed win for us, no matter how you look at it. Guaranteed win." How adorable they were in their short-sighted greed. "Besides," Linda continued, "with the money we'll save on her food and her share of the utilities, the loan will practically pay for itself." The very next day, Michael gave me the good news. "Mom, I talked to Linda and we agree. We're going to lend you the $15,000 for your house." "Oh, Michael!" I feigned tears of gratitude, while on the inside I was laughing at how easily they had walked right into my trap. They, who thought they were so cleverly using me, had just set the stage for their own downfall. "I'm going to the bank this afternoon to apply for the loan," he told me. "And I'll call Abigail to close the deal," I lied shamelessly. Of course, there was no Abigail with a dead brother, and there was no house for sale. But Michael and Linda wouldn't know that until it was far, far too late. That afternoon, while Michael was at the bank, mortgaging his home to give me a loan he thought was for my benefit, I was at David's office, finalizing the last details of my inheritance. "The final papers arrived from Dallas this morning," David informed me. "You now have full access to all the bank accounts. The $8 million is officially at your disposal. $8 million that Michael and Linda didn't know existed. $15,000 they were about to lend me, thinking they were doing me a favor. And a revenge plan that was about to make the coming months the most interesting of my entire life." "David," I said, with a smile he hadn't seen in years, "I need you to prepare some more documents for me. And I also need you to recommend the best private detective in the city." "A private detective? Helen, what exactly are you planning?" "Justice," I replied simply. "Pure, sweet justice." Michael returned from the bank that afternoon with a radiant look of self-satisfaction. He had secured the $15,000 home equity loan without a single problem, just as he'd expected. The bank knew his credit history, knew he had a stable job, and the house was more than enough collateral for such a relatively small loan. "Everything went perfectly, Mom," he announced, while Linda beamed at his side, as if they had just performed the most charitable deed of the century. "The money will be available in your account tomorrow morning." "That's wonderful, son," I exclaimed with genuine enthusiasm, though for entirely different reasons than they imagined. "I don't know how to thank you for this huge favor." "It's the least we can do," Linda said with that plastic smile I knew so well. "After all, we're family." Family. What a remarkably flexible word in that woman's mouth. That night, after I was sure they were asleep, I called David from my old cell phone, whispering from the confines of my room. "The bait worked perfectly," I reported. "Tomorrow morning, they're going to deposit $15,000 into my account." David's voice on the other end was cautious. "Helen, I hope you know what you're doing. What you're planning is creative, but it's also legally dangerous if not handled perfectly." "David, they stole more than $100,000 from me over the years. The $30,000 for the house down payment, the $15,000 for the failed beauty salon, the $45,000 for the wedding, not to mention 5 years of unpaid domestic labor. If we calculate it all with interest, they owe me closer to $200,000. Morally, you're absolutely right, but that doesn't make it legal." "That's why I need you," I said firmly. "I need everything to be perfectly documented. Every step, every transaction, every move. There can be no legal mistakes." There was a pause. "All right, Helen, I trust you. But please, be very careful." The next day, Michael insisted on accompanying me to the bank to make the deposit. He wanted to ensure the money went directly toward the purchase of my supposed new house. Of course, I had prepared the necessary theatrics. "Abigail told me to meet her directly at the title company," I explained as we walked. "She's going to bring all the property deeds, and I'll bring the certified check. That way, we can close the deal all at once. Are you sure you don't want me to go with you, Mom? That's a lot of money to be carrying around alone." "No, son, don't you worry. Abigail will be with me, and the title company is only 3 blocks from the bank. Besides, you have to get to work." At the bank, Michael watched as the teller deposited his $15,000 into my account. I then had her add my own $5,000 in savings, as we had agreed, $20,000 that, according to them, would be used to secure my new home. "There you go, Mom," Michael said, handing me the deposit slip with a paternalistic pat on my arm. "There's your $20,000. I hope you'll be very happy in your new house." "Oh, I'm sure I am going to be immensely happy," I replied with a smile he mistook for motherly gratitude. We said our goodbyes at the bank's entrance. Michael went off to work, convinced he had finally and cleverly solved the problem of his inconvenient mother. "Are the documents ready?" I asked as soon as I walked through his door. "Everything's right here," he said, pointing to a formidable stack of papers on his desk. "But Helen, I have to warn you again. Once we do this, there's no going back." "David, there's been no going back for me since the moment my own son watched his wife smash my mother's plate on the floor. Now it's my turn to move the pieces on the board." The documents were a work of legal art. David had used all his considerable expertise to create a perfectly legal web that Michael and Linda wouldn't see coming until it was far too late. First, he had created a shell corporation called Abigail Properties, LLC, with a business address at a colleague's office in another city. Second, he had prepared a set of flawlessly forged deeds for a non-existent property that, on paper, looked completely legitimate. Third, he had set up a corporate bank account for the shell company, where the $20,000 from the purchase would be deposited. "The beauty of this plan," David explained, "is that technically you're not stealing anything. Michael voluntarily lent you money for a real estate investment. The fact that this investment isn't what he thinks it is, well, that's another story." That afternoon, I called Michael from a payphone near David's office, pretending to be at the title company. "Michael, it's done. I just bought the house. That's great news, Mom. How is it? Do you like it?" he asked, his relief palpable even over the phone. "It's perfect. Small, but so cozy. It has 2 bedrooms, a full kitchen, and a beautiful little backyard. Abigail was right. It's an absolute steal for $20,000. "I'm so glad, Mom. So when are you planning to move in?" "Well, the house needs a few minor repairs. Abigail recommended a contractor who can get it all done in about a week. In the meantime, if it's not too much trouble, I'll stay these last few days with you." "Of course, Mom. It's no trouble at all. This is your home until you officially move." His home. The irony was so rich, so delicious, I almost laughed out loud. During that final week, while Michael and Linda discreetly celebrated my impending departure, I was diligently working on the 3rd phase of my plan. I had hired the private detective David had recommended, a sharp, no-nonsense man named Arthur, who had been a police detective for 20 years before opening his own agency. "What kind of investigation do you require, ma'am?" he had asked during our first meeting in a quiet coffee shop. "I want you to conduct a thorough investigation into the finances of my son, Michael Miller, and my daughter-in-law, Linda Miller. I want to know about their debts, their income, their assets, their bank transactions, everything. May I ask why? Because I'm going to buy their debts." Arthur looked at me with a flicker of surprise, but he was too professional to ask any more questions. "Understood. How deep do you want the investigation to go?" "To the bottom. Absolutely everything, no matter what it costs." The results came back 3 days later. Arthur had done an impeccable job. Michael and Linda weren't just in financial trouble. They were on the brink of total economic collapse. They owed $12,000 in credit card debt with a crippling 25% annual interest rate. They owed $8,000 on their car loan with $400 monthly payments. They owed $90,000 on the house mortgage with $800 monthly payments. And now, they owed an additional $15,000 for the home equity loan they had given me, adding another $300 to their monthly burden. In total, their debts added up to $125,000, with monthly payments that now consumed more than a third of Michael's take-home pay. But the most interesting part of the report was the identity of their creditors. The credit cards belonged to a large national bank that frequently sold off its bad debt portfolios. The car loan was with a finance company that also had a reputation for selling its problem loans. The house mortgage was with a regional institution known for being open to negotiations with private investors. "Arthur," I said after reviewing the detailed report, "I need you to find out exactly how I can buy all of these debts." "Buy them, ma'am? That requires significant capital." "I have the capital," I said calmly. "I just need to know the process." Buying debt, it turned out, was simpler than I had imagined. Banks and finance companies regularly sold their delinquent portfolios to specialized collection agencies, usually for 40 or 50 cents on the dollar. With the right contacts and enough cash, anyone could become the creditor for someone else's debts. The entire process can take between 2 and 4 weeks, an investment specialist David recommended explained to me. But with your available capital, you could acquire that entire debt portfolio for approximately $60,000. $60,000. $60,000 to become the legal owner of every single one of Michael and Linda's debts. $60,000 to hold the power to decide whether to offer them lenient payment plans or to call in all the loans at once, triggering their complete financial ruin. "Do it," I ordered without a moment's hesitation. While the wheels of justice began to turn silently behind the scenes, I continued to play my role of the grateful, departing mother. I cooked, I cleaned, I smiled demurely when they spoke to me. Michael and Linda were so giddy about my imminent departure that they had even become pleasant. "You're going to miss cooking for us, aren't you, mother-in-law?" Linda said to me one night at dinner. "Oh, yes," I replied with perfect sincerity. "But I'm sure you'll find a way to manage without me." "Of course. Michael is a great cook when he wants to be. Right, honey?" Michael nodded with his mouth full, completely unaware that in 2 weeks, he'd be cooking all his own meals because they would no longer be able to afford the luxury of my free labor. "And you'll be in your new little house," Linda continued. "Independent, free, without all the complications of living with family." Independent and free. If only she knew how truly free I was about to become. That night, just before bed, I checked my phone and saw a text message from David. It read, "It's all set. The collection agencies accepted the offer. In 1 week, you will be the legal owner of all their debts. 1 more week. I just had to keep up the charade for 1 more week, and then I could finally reveal my true identity. Not the submissive, grateful Helen they had known for 5 years, but the new Helen, the millionaire. The creditor, the one who held all the power, the one who was about to teach them what it really meant to be kicked out of your own home. The day came sooner than I expected. A week later, David called me early in the morning with the news I had been waiting for. "Helen, it's done. You are officially the owner of all of Michael and Linda's debts, $125,000 that they now owe, directly to you." I hung up the phone and sat on the edge of my bed, letting the magnitude of what had just happened sink in. In the span of a few weeks, I had gone from being a penniless woman being evicted from her home to being the primary creditor for the very people who had kicked me out. Michael and Linda had no idea what was coming. That morning at breakfast, I performed my role to perfection. I served the coffee, made the scrambled eggs, and kept up a stream of trivial conversation about the weather. "Mom," Michael said as he was getting ready for work, "do you know when you're moving out for good? The contractor should be done soon, right?" "Very soon, son," I replied calmly. "I'm just waiting for them to finish the last few repairs on the house." "How exciting!" Linda exclaimed with a level of false enthusiasm that was almost comical. "Your new independent life is about to begin." My new independent life. If only she knew. After Michael left for work and Linda settled in her room to watch her morning soap operas, I drove to David's office to collect all the official documents that certified me as their new creditor. "Here are all the contracts," he said, handing me a folder that felt heavy with power. "The credit cards, the car loan, the $15,000 equity loan they gave you, and most importantly, the main mortgage on the house. You now have the right to demand immediate payment of all debts if they miss a single payment." How does that work exactly? It's simple. If Michael and Linda fall behind on any of their payments for more than 30 days, you can exercise your right as the primary creditor and demand full and immediate payment of all outstanding debts. If they can't pay, you proceed with foreclosure. Foreclosure. The word sounded like music to my ears. And how long do you think they have before they start running into trouble? David checked his notes and smiled. "According to my calculations, with their current expenses and the new loan they took out for you, they'll start missing payments within 2 months max." But I had no intention of waiting that long. "David," I said, "what would happen if I decided to demand immediate payment of the $15,000 loan? The one they gave me for the fake house? Well, technically, you have every right. It was a personal loan without any specific collateral beyond a promise to pay. You can demand it be repaid whenever you want. And if they can't pay, then you can sue them for breach of contract and begin the process of seizing their assets to recover your money." That afternoon, as I was preparing dinner, I decided the time had come to begin the final phase of my plan. Michael came home from work, tired as always, and slumped down at the table, waiting for me to serve him his food. "Michael," I said, as I placed a plate of pot roast in front of him, "I need to talk to you about something important." "What's wrong, Mom?" "It's about the money you lent me." Michael looked up from his plate, his curiosity piqued. Linda, who had appeared in the kitchen, drawn by the serious tone of my voice, moved closer to listen. "What about the money?" Linda asked, a slight edge of worry in her voice. "Well, it turns out there's been a problem with the house." "What kind of problem?" Michael stopped eating. "Abigail spoke to me this morning. Apparently, there's a major legal issue with the property. The brother who died, he had significant debts we didn't know about, and now his creditors are putting a lien on the house." I watched as the color drained from Michael's face. "What does that mean, Mom?" "It means the sale has been canceled. I can't keep the house. The lawyers say the whole legal process is going to take months to resolve, maybe even years." "And the money?" Linda asked, her voice sharp as glass. "That's the problem," I said, looking down at my hands with feigned distress. "Since the sale was canceled, I have to return the $20,000. But Abigail had already spent part of the money to pay some of her brother's most urgent debts." Michael and Linda stared at each other in naked horror. "How much can she return?" Michael asked, his voice a strained whisper. "Only my $5,000. The other $15,000. It's gone, tied up in the legal battle." The silence that followed was deafening. I could see the gears in their heads grinding, trying to process the scale of the disaster. "But Mom," Michael said, his voice trembling with panic, "that $15,000, I took that out on the house mortgage. I have to make payments on it every month." "I know, son, and I feel just terrible about it. But it wasn't my fault. It was Abigail who didn't tell us about these legal problems." "So what are we going to do now?" Linda yelled, her composure cracking. "We don't have $15,000 to give back to the bank." "Calm down," I told them in a steady, reassuring voice. "I've been thinking about a solution." "What solution?" they asked in unison. "Well, I could stay here a little longer until we resolve this. And I could help you pay off that debt, gradually, with my pension." "How?" Michael looked utterly desperate, My pension is $300 a month. If I stayed here and gave you all of that money every month to pay down the debt, we'd have it all paid off in about 5 years. 5 more years of having me in the house. I could see the pure horror dawning in Linda's eyes. But mother-in-law, she stammered, trying to regain her composure, you already signed the release forms. You can't legally live here anymore. Ah, yes, the forms, I said, as if I had almost forgotten. Well, I suppose we would have to nullify those documents, wouldn't we? After all, they were signed under the false premise that I would have my own house. Nullify the forms? Michael looked completely lost. Yes, since the entire situation has changed, we would have to return everything to its original state. I watched as Michael and Linda exchanged panicked glances. They had been counting the days until my departure. Linda had already been measuring my room for new shelves for her shoe collection. Mom, Michael said finally, is there no other solution? Well, I said, pretending to think it over carefully, I suppose you could find the money from another source and pay back the $15,000 immediately. That way, I could look for another house and you'd be free of the debt. Where are we going to get $15,000? Linda shrieked. I don't know, I said with a helpless shrug. Maybe another loan? Selling something of value? Asking family for help? My family doesn't have any money, Michael mumbled. And neither does mine, Linda added grimly. Then I suppose, I concluded with an air of finality, the only option is for me to stay here and pay you back, little by little, with my pension. The rest of the dinner passed in a deathly silence. Michael and Linda barely touched their food, too busy processing their new, horrifying reality. Not only had they failed to get rid of me, but now they were $15,000 deeper in debt and legally bound to keep me in their house. That night, I heard them arguing in their room until the early hours of the morning. Their angry, frustrated voices carried through the thin walls like music to my ears. This is a complete disaster. Linda was screaming. Now we're stuck with her forever. What did you want me to do? Michael shot back. If I didn't lend her the money, we'd look like the heartless children who threw their own mother out on the street. But now we have a $15,000 debt that we can't pay. At least she's going to help with $300 a month. $300. The loan payment is $350 a month. We're going to have to find an extra $50 every single month for the next 5 years. What other choice do we have? The argument raged on until they finally fell silent from sheer exhaustion. I, on the other hand, slept like a baby, knowing that the most entertaining part of my revenge was about to begin. Because they still didn't know that I was their new creditor. They didn't know that I had $8 million in the bank. They didn't know that every move they had made for the past week had been perfectly orchestrated by me. And they had absolutely no idea what was waiting for them in the days to come. I just need you to sign for it. Linda signed and closed the door, staring at the envelope as if it were a live grenade. She stood there in the living room for several minutes, not daring to open it. What's wrong, dear? I asked, my voice laced with genuine motherly concern. I don't know, mother-in-law. It's something legal. I think we should wait for Michael to get home. 30 minutes later, the second messenger arrived. Another official envelope. Then the third. By the time Michael walked through the door from work at 6 o'clock, there were 4 official envelopes laid out in a neat, ominous row on the dining room table. What is all this? He asked, his voice trembling slightly. I haven't opened them, Linda said. I wanted to wait for you. It's not just about late payments, Mr. Miller. It's about your future ability to pay. Our analysis indicates that you are on a clear path to bankruptcy, and we prefer to recover our investment now. That's ridiculous. I have a stable job. I've never... Mr. Miller, David interrupted coolly. Is it true that you recently took out an additional home equity loan for $15,000? Michael went silent. Is it true that your monthly expenses currently exceed your income by approximately $800? More silence. Is it true that you have been using credit cards to pay for basic living expenses? That's just temporary. Mr. Miller, our analysis is correct. You represent an unacceptable credit risk. You have 30 days to settle all your outstanding payments in full, or we will proceed with legal action. Legal action? Foreclosure on your home, wage garnishment, seizure of your assets. Everything that is within our legal rights. I saw tears welling up in my son's eyes. For the first time in years, he seemed to remember who he really was, where he came from. "I know, Mom," he whispered, "but I don't see any other option." "Let me think," I said, as if I were genuinely searching for a solution. Maybe I can help somehow." "How, Mom?" "You don't have any money." "No, but I have contacts. People I met during all my years of work. Let me make some calls. Let me talk to some people. Maybe I can find someone who is willing to help." For the first time in weeks, I saw a genuine flicker of hope in Michael's eyes. "You'd really do that for us, Mom?" "Michael," I said, taking his hand in mine, "you are my only son. I would do anything to protect my family." That night, while they tossed and turned in their bed, I planned the final, glorious blow. The moment I would reveal who truly held the power in this house. The moment the submissive mother would transform into the most powerful woman they had ever known. 8 million? Michael looked like he was going to faint. $8 million. My brother died 2 months ago and left me his entire fortune. His construction company in Texas, his commercial properties, his stock portfolio, everything. Linda staggered back. "You're insane. That can't be true." I reached into my purse, pulled out the official inheritance documents, and tossed them onto the coffee table in front of them. "Here are the papers signed by the lawyers in Dallas. Every cent is documented and completely legal." I saw a powerful, free woman who had reclaimed her dignity and her strength. I picked up my phone and called David. "How does it feel to be a millionaire?" he asked. "It feels like justice," I replied. "Pure and sweet justice." That night, for the first time in 5 long years, I slept soundly, knowing that I would never again have to ask for permission to exist, knowing that I had reclaimed not only my power but my soul. Michael and Linda learned that night what it truly meant to be afraid of losing everything. And I learned that it's never too late to stand up for yourself, to take back control of your life, and to prove that older women are not disposable. The woman they had kicked out over a piece of cake had awakened a lioness, and lionesses once awakened never go back to being lambs. Michael called me every Sunday, not to ask for money or favors, but simply to check in, to know how I was. In those quiet conversations, little by little, I had begun to get back the son I thought I had lost forever. "Mom," he had said to me just last week, his voice filled with a remorse that sounded genuine. I wanted to apologize again, not just for what happened, but for all the years I stood by and let Linda treat you so badly. "So why didn't you defend me, Michael?" I had asked him directly. There was a long pause. "Because it was easier to please her than to confront her," he finally admitted. "Because I thought you would always be there, no matter how we treated you. Because I took your love and your sacrifice completely for granted." Those words, that honest confession, had been worth more to me than all the money in the world, like me. I sat down in my favorite chair under the pergola and closed my eyes, feeling the warm sun on my face. For the first time in decades, I wasn't afraid of the future. I didn't have to ask for permission for anything. I didn't have to justify my existence to anyone. I was free. Free to be generous or strict as I saw fit. Free to forgive or to keep my distance as my heart dictated. Free to use my power as I believed was right. And I had learned something fundamental. Respect isn't begged for. It's demanded. Dignity isn't given. It's defended. And it is never, ever too late to take back control of your own life. That afternoon, while reviewing the financial statements for my foundations, I received an unexpected call. It was Abigail, my dear old neighbor, the one who had stopped visiting when Linda had treated her so badly. "Helen, I just heard about your new situation. I am so happy to know that things turned out so well for you." "Thank you, Abigail. Life has mysterious ways of balancing the scales." "You know what you should do?" she said, her voice full of excitement. "You should write a book about your story. It would be an inspiration to so many women who are going through the same thing." A book. The idea intrigued me. "Maybe I will, Abigail. And do you know what I'd call it?" "What?" "The piece of cake that changed my life." We laughed together. And in that shared laughter there was joy, freedom, and the deep satisfaction of knowing that sometimes, just sometimes, justice really does triumph. The sun began to set over my garden, painting the sky in brilliant golden and purple hues. It was the end of a new day for a new woman, one who had been born from the ashes of humiliation. And tomorrow would be another day to continue living on my own terms, with my own power, writing my own story.